Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the FPV Academy, episode number 4. Today, we're going to talk about LiPo batteries. A little bit of housekeeping up front. If you're new to this channel, to this format, to this show, you may participate in the various chat rooms, either in the YouTube live chat. I'm going to bring this up on the screen as well during the show. And you may also join the Discord live chat. The link to all that is down here in that on that info page, where you can get to if you type in that bit.ly link that I've put up on the screen. And as usual, I have, well, today only one guest, but the default guest on this show, bringing him up here on the screen right now. Thanks for joining us again. Travis, not fast enough. Welcome to the show. How's life today?
Awesome. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for taking the time again to talk to our audience again and lay down some of the foundation you need to become a happy flyer. So let's jump right in to talk about a couple of basics while we wait for everyone to settle in. And well, hang on, just before, let's do a little quick check. So Travis, if you could look before I go and start if the YouTube stream is looking good on your side. Make sure that you don't turn the volume up. And we have a look if people are in the chat. I see a couple
people hanging out on Discord.
Yep, the Discord chat room is already getting busy, and yeah, Pilsner Popper is saying, howdy ho, video, audio looking great. So we had a couple of sync issues. I did a couple of changes. So let's make a little test. Let's have a look if this is in sync. Let's have a look at that. Tell me, guys, was that video and audio in sync? In case the problem was not on my side, but on YouTube, I'm again recording it this time. Last time I forgot. So whenever you guys see the live video and you don't see this red circle spinning around here, remind me to press the recording button next time. I didn't do this on the last one, but this time I do. So if there are problems, then I'll take the video that I'm recording offline and render it and put it online, as I did for episode 2. Sorry, didn't do it for episode 3, so it stays there for eternity and embarrasses us by not being in sync. Anyway, I think today we are, so let's talk about LiPo batteries. We want to today give you a basic understanding to stay safe and have long-lasting, high-performance fun with your batteries. And for that, let's go back a little bit and have a look back in the days when LiPo batteries were first introduced to the hobby. So I still remember the time where we've been driving and flying and boating with nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride batteries, and I'm still using some of them to this day. And then it was quite exciting when we had the first lithium polymer batteries, because they delivered such a great step up in terms of performance, but also they delivered a great step up in terms of the risks that these batteries pose to us, to our property, to our family, to our models. And that's probably, I would say, 10, 15 years ago since that technology really became mainstream, not only in the remote control hobby, but also across all other industries, primarily laptops, mobile phones, and all sorts of other electronic doohickeys. And the first thing we want to talk about is safety. Now, a lot of us have become accustomed to having lithium polymer batteries in pretty much all devices that we're using, and this has led to people not being so cautious anymore as we used to be back then, because there has been done a lot on the manufacturer side to keep us safe. However, this doesn't always work, and in terms of hobby batteries, a lot of those safety precautions haven't done because, well, they don't work really well together with high performance batteries in terms of the throughput they have and also in terms of the weight they have. But even if you have safety circuits and mechanisms, they don't always work as we, for example, famously have seen with some of the Samsung batteries. There's lots of jokes, and I think most of you have heard about was it the Note 7 drivers? I don't remember exactly, but there was
There
one.
was one of the Note phones that was notorious for catching on fire.
Exactly, and I'm not sure if we have completely figured out what the reason was. I think some of them was there was not enough space in the case and they were under pressure, but maybe also that the protection circuits on these batteries aren't working properly. So um, let's talk about what the dangers of lithium polymer batteries are. I have made a lot of videos about batteries, and one of the live streams that I did about batteries maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that was probably one of my brightest moments on the internet. And by bright, I don't mean necessarily the smartest moments, but the most visible. People making GIFs about me and laughing about it and posting it again and again. Because I was sitting there in my previous office mucking around with batteries on the live stream, and then literally one of them exploded in my face. And exploding, it's not as dramatic as it sounds. I've destroyed a lot of batteries on purpose. This one was not on purpose, but they don't explode like a bomb and stuff flies everywhere. But usually they just kind of burn off. You see maybe a little bit of fire, a couple of sparks, but what you mainly see is that they get warm and there's a lot of smoke coming out. So that's exactly what's happening. I was holding the battery and a lot of smoke came out. Just before the stream, I had discharged this battery quite heavily and then charged it back up to do exactly the same thing during the live stream to show what parameters I'm putting into the charger and what happens to the battery, etc. And so it was just tortured and then charged up fully again. It was maybe 5 or 10 minutes before I started the show, and then it spontaneously combusted in my hands and was stinking up the place. So the main danger that I see coming from lithium polymer batteries is when they start to react in a not intended way, then they emit a lot of smoke, a lot of very dangerous smoke, basically evaporated acid, which can attack your lungs, which smells horrible, and which also can corrode and attack basically everything that's around it. So if you are in an enclosed environment and such a battery goes off, you don't want to breathe that stuff in. You want to get out there as quickly as possible, and you don't want to breathe that stuff in at all, and you don't want to have anything that's of value to you to come in contact with the smoke that's coming out of these batteries. That's why I also feel really uncomfortable every time I'm sitting in an airplane, because I know that everyone has its phone around, everyone has a laptop, and a couple of crazy people like you and me might have their bags stuffed full of unprotected lithium batteries. I've been flying many times with lithium batteries, and they're kind of trying to crack down with this, but they just leave us through with so much stuff which they don't check. That yeah, it's kind of scary. So One of the things that I'm always looking at in terms of danger of a battery, when I'm having some sort of a battery, it looks the same when it's charged or when it's discharged. But when it's charged, it just contains so much more energy and thus so much more potential for problems that I just like to keep my batteries all stored at storage voltage. That to me makes me feel a lot safer. I've done a couple of experiments that included, for example, just driving a nail through it or just smacking it with a hammer to see what happens. And I can tell you that there's a significant difference what happens to a charged battery and to a non-charged, discharged, or at storage charged battery. If you have a battery that's really fully charged and then something happens to it, there's a lot more reaction than if you in some way hurt a battery that's not at full charge. If you are doing physical damage like driving a nail through it, cutting it, or crunching it up, whatever, to a battery that's sitting there at storage voltage, maybe it's getting a little warm, maybe nothing even happens at all. However, if you overcharge it heavily or if you do it to a fully charged battery, then things are starting to go bad. So number one is the smoke that's coming out of it. Number two is that they can create a fire and start to ignite other things around it. So let's talk about the general safety procedures you should do in order to stay safe when you are charging batteries. So what would you say, Travis, is the most important thing you need to do to stay safe with batteries in your life?
Well, the first thing that safety begins with understanding some of the designations that are on a battery. So you need to know your how batteries are being identified as 1S, 2S, and what that means. So the number of S means the number of cells in your battery that are connected in series where the voltage adds together. And be able to set up your charger to match that so that you're charging at the appropriate voltage. The next thing that you're going to need to set in your charger is to set the current rate that you're charging at. And to set your current rate, we usually stick to a 1C rating. And what a C rating is, if you look at the capacity of your battery, say it's 250 milliamp hour battery.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to, before we delve into all the ins and outs, what you need to configure, I was hoping you were mentioning two main things before you even start considering what how to operate all that stuff. Two main things. At first, never charge unattended. If you are charging if you're connecting a piece of unknown chemistry to some device that pumps electrons into it, watch it, and in person by looking at it, but also, well, you can't see it here, but by investing into proper smoke detectors. Not the cheap ones, but those that have the radioactive signal on there, which are a lot better in detecting if stuff goes wrong. And number two is make sure it's contained within something. So can be a lithium, a LiPo guard, a bag like this, or can be some sort of other non-flammable container, for example, a metal pot, or what I like to use is a vented, that's why I drilled this hole in here, ammo can. You can also just take the seal out, but I drilled the hole in here so I can close the lid and actually latch the lid while I still have my charging cables coming out here. So I drilled a hole in the size of these, I don't know what they're called, these putting wires through walls things, so that when my wires are pulling through here, they're not getting hurt by the sharp metal that's on the side. And yeah, contain it somewhere. So yeah, sorry to interrupt, Travis. Keep going on talking about how do you classify LiPos? What do you see on the label? What does it mean?
To add to that too, another thing that I would encourage people to do is to examine all of the surroundings in your charging environment. So just because it's in an ammo can doesn't mean that can isn't going to get extremely hot, or that flames aren't going to come out of your vent. I love the idea about the hole. All I did was remove the rubber seal in mine so that pressure doesn't build up. The idea is for pressure not to build up inside of a sealed container. But I realized as I was writing some notes for this show, that my charging station is a wooden workbench, and how good am I at actually making sure that I use that containment every time? And if something were to go wrong, I'm charging on a wooden workbench, and that's not a great idea. So I would encourage everyone out there to examine where you're charging your batteries. Is there cardboard nearby? Are there papers nearby? Are there plastic items or foam items nearby? My charging station is right back over there on the bench, and it's right below foam airplanes. And all these things are flammable items, so extra precautions should be taken. A lot of us were coming up on the winter months, and we're flying inside. If you're charging your batteries inside and something is to go wrong, I mean, you're not going to be sleeping in your house at night. Your wife's going to be pretty mad at you if something vents. It's going to stink. So try to pick a basement or a garage, some kind of contained area. But yeah, so just be safe and examine those surroundings. We talked about having a smoke detector. I think some sort of fire suppressant. Have a fire extinguisher nearby, or know where your fire extinguisher is if something were to go wrong. Maybe a bucket of sand or something that you can stop a fire with. Then moving on to the safe practices for charging. We were talking about a 1C charging rate. There are some batteries that designate a faster charging rate out there, but 1C, basically, if you have a 250 milliamp hour battery, 1C would be to charge at that same 250 milliamp charging rate.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Travis. I do have a fire extinguisher here, but note that if you have a lithium battery burning and you're spraying it with whatever stuff is in most fire extinguishers, it's not going to do much to the actual chemistry fire in there, because that's self-sustained, that doesn't need any external, that doesn't need oxygen from the outside, that just keeps on burning. You can take a lithium polymer battery when it's burning and submerge it in water, and it will keep burning. You might remember those experiments from, at least we did them in school with in the chemistry classes, where you take a little piece of lithium and throw it in water, and that makes it go off already. So a lot of these fire extinguishers do nothing to the actual chemistry fire, but they're very useful to contain all the other stuff around in the environment that potentially has started to burn already. The most effective way of stopping a already burning lithium polymer battery from creating more damage around that is to contain it in a bucket of sand. So whenever we have races, FPV races, where batteries are not every time, but on almost every second or third race, we have a battery destroyed by either a prop strike or because it hit a gate or something. We always have a bucket of sand there to dump the suspicious batteries in there. Sorry to interrupt. Please keep going.
I think we pretty much covered the charging rate. Some of the guys are chatting in Discord. there are those that stick to 1C and there are those that charge faster. There are batteries out there that designate themselves as safely being able to charge. I've seen up to 5C. But when you're pushing voltage into a pack and you're pushing current into a pack, this is one of its cycles to failure, and these batteries don't last forever. So one of the things, it extends the life of a battery to not push it so hard on a charging cycle, although it does take a little bit longer to get back into the air. And there's a lot less heat that's built up at slower charging rates. And I think heat is something to point out. When your batteries are charging, some of the nicer chargers actually have temperature sensors that will monitor your pack temperature while it's charging. But you can stop by from time to time as you're monitoring that charging process and just check and see if a battery is getting warm and giving you, or starting to puff up, giving you some kind of indication that there is a problem, and act accordingly.
Yes, that's right. There's some discussion about charging rates in the Discord chat, and yes, Pedro was also so nice to post the funny video about my battery mishaps in the Discord chat as well. So if you want to check this out, the Discord chat stays permanently active across all the streams. So yes, I see the timestamp there, 2016 May. So, or May or March, somewhere early in 2016, that stuff happens. Graphene battery punch out.
Adam actually added something that's really interesting here in the Discord chat, that he stores his batteries in the fridge to slow down the degradation that takes place in a cell over time, even when it's charged at storage voltage. And I thought that was pretty neat too. I remember years back I saw at the flying field, when sort of predating drones, that there was a guy with a puffy battery, and he mentioned that he used to take it home and freeze it, and it would unpuff after he froze it, and then once he discharged it again, it would puff back up again during the discharge process. It's absolutely terribly unsafe practice, but it's very interesting that it is so related to the temperature surrounding the battery, how the battery is responding.
Yeah, temperature is certainly an important point for batteries. They don't perform as well if they're cold, which is, performing means that there's exchange of electrons happening in some way. So we want that to happen when we flying them, which is only a very small fraction of the time of the existence of the battery. 99% of the time, we don't want anything to happen, but we want to have this thing stay as it is. So I have you ever heard about a LiPo warmer, Travis?
Well, I live in Florida, so.
Probably not, so yeah. I never had seen the need for that here as well, but yeah, when I came across this, I said, "What, really? Is that a thing?" And I looked it up, and a couple of my friends in Germany, when they go fly, especially in winter, they use LiPo warmers, because LiPo batteries, I think below 20 degrees Celsius, you start to note the drop in performance. So if you want to have a battery performing at its peak, it should be, I think, don't quote me on that, but somewhere between 20 and 40 degrees Celsius the battery should have, and then it will perform well. So if you are out there in the winter, don't let your batteries cool down and then expect stellar performance out of them. But keep them in the car, keep them in their pocket, or whatever, to warm them up. Then they will deliver good performance. And I'm pretty sure the other way around is true as well. If they are really cold, then they pose less of a risk because they can't react that violently. And yeah, I think there's at least some evidence or some assumption there that they don't degrade as quickly if you keep them cold. So yeah, thanks, Adam, for throwing in your cold 2 cents.
Yeah, Adam also just pointed out that one of the major killers of lipos is to charge them up and not discharge them right away. So once we force all that energy into a pack, that energy wants to come out. It's not happy to all be shoved in there. And if we don't discharge those batteries soon after charging them up, you let them sit for a couple of days, degradation is going to take place, and the pack's going to end up puffy, and it's not going to be able to deliver its full current and full capacity after that point. So
Yeah,
these are
that's
all
right.
things that
So
kill a battery.
I like to use the analogy of a balloon. So a battery, a discharged battery, is like a non-blown up balloon, and if you're charging it, you're pumping electrons in, you're blowing up the balloon, and at that point, it has the tension, the potential to produce electricity, but it also is in a excited state that makes it deteriorate faster. So as it was said in the last couple of posts here, like Adam said, letting them sit for a bit, like 2 days before flying, leads to puffy batteries and or degradation of the conductivity. So my rule of thumb is to charge them. Oh, let me take the mouse pointer off your nose here. Is to charge them as as short as I can before I go fly. So usually when I decide it's time to go for a flying session, I put all my batteries on charge that I need for that session. Luckily, I have a lot of chargers, so I can charge all my batteries in one go, and then I'll go and fly, and I'll make sure that I go through all of them. So I usually have a couple of backup quads because, usually in the normal flying session, something happens to the stuff that I fly, and I don't want to be at first sitting there not getting my fix by not having flown as much as I planned to. I also don't want to waste time during that time to fix up my my flying things. I want to go through that designated amount of batteries in that amount of time that I have that I've taken to fly, and make sure that all the batteries are down to storage voltage again. So don't charge them up the day before, but charge them up as short as you can before your flying session, and then make sure that they're all discharged again. That's the safest, and also keeps the batteries at peak performance for the longest.
So you mentioned you've got a lot of chargers. What kind of chargers are you using these days?
Yeah, I think we've talked for now. How long do we go for? This was half an hour. Let's start moving away from batteries and go to chargers for a little bit, and then we might come back to the batteries themselves and go a little more into probably along the way while talking about chargers. Then for the more advanced chargers, we talk about the settings and the parameters, and that will probably lead us then to a little deeper dive into the different types and characteristics of batteries. I have put up a couple of different chargers here onto my little rotisserie, is that the word for it? And I'm not using any of them, but I just want to show them in order to just demonstrate the different types of chargers you could use. Oh, what happened to the camera here? Hang on, let me quickly restart the camera. Plop, plop. Yep, now it works. So the first one right here, this one here, is one of my very first hobby LiPo charger. It came in 2013 together with the Hobby King Pocket Quad, and I know it takes a little bit of time to refresh. So Travis, can you see that thing on the live stream?
I'm still looking at the rotisserie right now.
Yeah, so a couple of
So it
seconds
looks
later.
like a little USB, one of the little individual USB dongles with a single
Exactly.
plug.
So this is probably one of these symbols that they didn't even bother putting a case around it. It came with a little bit of heat shrink. I've removed that so we can see the components a little better, but there's just a very small number of components. There's no display, no interface whatsoever, and it just connects over USB, and you plug the battery in at the other end. And there's a lot of different ones in that fashion. I have collected them over time. So, well, there's some other crap in here as well, but there's a lot of these uh, RTF chargers. So they come in all sorts of different plastic cases, but most of them have in common that they plug into USB, and at the other end you plug the battery in. Some of them do have some sort of an LED, but yeah, for most of them you just don't know what happens. You plug them into USB uh, and you plug the battery in the other end and hope for the best. So um, this one here, a lot of people might be familiar with this one here. This is one of the um, chargers that came with one of the Blade models. Then
I think that's
here
the
is,
appeal, though, of the more simplistic chargers to a lot of newcomers in the hobby is that it's almost like a shortcut that can be taken where you feel like you don't have to learn everything about the battery chemistry. You can just take your battery and plug it into this charger, and eventually an LED light's going to go out, and you can put it in your craft, and you can fly. And there's the downfall to that, like you said, is it's kind of a mystery box. That first charger that you pointed out, I don't know if you want to hold that a little bit closer to the screen. I think that's a great example of the mystery box that's sort of in play here with the USB chargers, because I'm not seeing any sort of intelligent charging circuitry on that charger at all. So it looks like it's just got a voltage divider where it's looking for whether or not the battery has reached 4.2 volts, and then it's going to stop dumping raw 5-volt power into that battery,
yeah, hopefully,
and
maybe.
hopefully stop. Yeah, yeah. So there's not a lot of there's no there's no charging profile that's taking place. It's not matched properly to lithium polymer chemistry. And these chargers are usually coming inside toys, and most of us aren't experts in circuits or engineering, and we may not know exactly what that is. I wouldn't use that battery charger at all. I'd rather not fly. I don't consider it safe.
Yeah, this is, before we move on and talk about better chargers. They don't necessarily have to be more expensive, but there's a couple of things you can look out for. I want to mention two ways that if you're using this and you're aware of the risk and you're watching it, etc., how you can still make some sort of a judgment about what the charger is doing without any sophisticated electronic knowledge. So Travis, you can just look at it and say, well, there's not a smart chip on it which does a proper LiPo charging curve, whatever. So that's why I don't trust it. By just looking at it from the outside, there's two things you can do to sort of get an understanding of what's happening. So there's two devices I want to show that that can make sense. One of them is this one here. I don't know what I exactly put into eBay to buy this thing. It says Kaiweiss on the um, uh, on the case here. It has a USB plug on one side and a USB plug on the other side. And when you plug it in, let me see if I can somehow find a way to do this on camera. So yeah, I take this mobile battery here, and then I take some sort of a extension. Yep, that'll do. So what this thing is doing, it's using the input port of your charger, because as I said, a lot of them connect over USB, and you would plug this thing in between the charger and whatever your USB power source is. And I would recommend, do not use, if you're using one of these cheap chargers, don't plug it into anything that's really worth a lot to you, including your laptop or your computer, because it might not only do damage to the battery, but it also might wreak havoc in whatever you plug it in by shorting it or overtaxing the USB circuit. So use a wall wart or like a mobile battery power unit to power that stuff. So when you're using this device and plug it in, it will usually probably needs to plug in something on the other side. Damn, I'm not doing anything. Let me, oh, now I'm getting into the danger zone again when I plug stuff in that, okay, let me find a battery that I can plug in here. So, does it actually still work? Other way around. Huh, it briefly worked. Here we go. This plug has an issue. I think I need a different cable. Come on, don't let me down. Here. So, yep, kind of works. So, this thing will show the voltage that's going through the USB plug, and more importantly, and I'll cut off again, it will show the amperage that's going through it. So this way you can get sort of an understanding of how much current is the charger consuming. And if it's consuming a lot more than you expect, then maybe it's also outputting too much into the battery. So that's one way to analyze a charger before or while you're using it. And then the other method is looking at the other end by analyzing your batteries after they have been charged with some sort of a voltage meter. So here two very simple ones. This one is here. This one here is the Hobby King Battery Doctor, I think it's called. It has a couple of balance plugs in here, so it's for anything between 2 and 6S, and it will show you the voltage of each individual cell. Before I had this thing here, which is a 1S version of a different company of this thing, I made up a harness that I can connect 1S batteries to check it with this battery doctor or medic here. But this one here has become quite popular amongst tiny whoop flyers. This is the beta FPV version, but it comes, I think it's just a rebranded thing, has two plugs at the side, the PH2 and the JST 1.25. When you plug a battery into that thing, it just shows you the voltage in a nice large display here, and using that you can double check what your charger has decided to terminate the battery at. So in this case it's just sitting comfortably a little bit above average storage voltage, so it's kind of alright to sit on my wooden workbench here. So so much to these cheap RTF chargers. Let's move up a little step, unless you want to add something at this point, Travis.
I will say that, we pointed out one that I personally wouldn't use. There are many of the RTF chargers that do include some sort of intelligent circuitry in there. So the challenge is really just if it's in a mystery box, we don't know what's in there. But yeah, moving on to the more what I would call the smarter chargers.
Yeah, I think there's there's a little bit of a gray zone in between, as you said. These really cheap ones, you really don't know how exactly they cost, because you spend like 30, 50, or $100 or something on some toy, and it comes with a charger, and it's some plastic box, and well, it was probably cheap because the whole thing wasn't very expensive. But how cheap is it? Because if you put 20 cents of electronics into it, or $2, might make a big difference in how it actually works. So there are some cheap chargers that are doing probably a good job, and usually, if you buy from a reputable company, like for example Horizon Hobby, you could expect that their quality is a little better, because obviously they want their stuff to perform properly, and they don't want to have their customer's house burned down, because that comes back on them, back on their reputation. And if then a couple of people figure out, oh, they're actually using really cheap, really dodgy components in there, then that's not good for them. So they usually spend the $2 to make a somewhat reasonable, even though cheap and single-purpose charging circuit. But yeah, from there there are a little more sophisticated chargers that come with RTF models, especially with a little more advanced RTF models. I have a couple of examples of those on rotation here. So the next one here is, as you can see, has two balance connections, and it's not powered over USB, but using some sort of a power supply, a wall wart that I have put in a different box. It says balance charger here, and it charges 2 to 3S LiPo batteries, charge rate 1 amp, and it has 2 LEDs, who should tell you something. Then I have a different example here, which is coming up, wrong button, right now. Helimax charger. This is only 1S, so the voltage always stays the same, but you have a couple LEDs at the top and a couple buttons down below that allow you to change the current on it. It has this red JST plug here to plug in the battery, and also some sort of a barrel plug to plug in a 5 to 7.5 volt DC power source. So yeah, those are kind of the cheap single-purpose chargers you get with a lot of the ready-to-fly models. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Let's move on. Travis, what's the next step up in charging technology from here?
Well, the next step up gives you a little bit more of a user interface, some sort of display and feedback that lets you, we talked earlier about, that lets you monitor what's happening as it happens. And these battery chargers, they kind of come in 2 flavors. One is still going to be similar to what you've shown there, which is like a purpose specific, and that's most common for our 1S batteries. So a lot of us that are hanging out on this channel, we fly a lot of micros, and we're flying those on 1S LiPos. And if the majority of what you fly or all of what you fly is a 1S micro, then you don't need to invest in the larger, more advanced balance chargers that do multiple different battery chemistries. There are a number of great chargers out there that are specific to 1S batteries that allow you to change your charging rate, that allow you to change between standard charging voltage of 4.2 volts and high voltage of 4.35. And they're going to give you that, the user interface and that feedback on your voltage and what's happening, and have multiple ports so that you can charge lots of batteries at one time. And I fly lots of different things. I have more advanced chargers, but I also have one of these, and it is my primary, use charger for all of my 1S batteries, even though my more advanced chargers could also charge them. They are extremely convenient. And I think they're just an absolute must-have today, and they're not that expensive. Do you have a particular favorite when it comes to that category?
Yeah, I'm just putting it up on the screen here. So this used to be my favorite charger for a long time, and as far as I remember, this was the charger that I used to blow up the battery on the last live stream on this topic 3 years ago. This is the IntelliPeak Ice Competition Charger, Discharger, and Cycler, which I think is not being made anymore, but at the time where I bought this, this was one of the only chargers that did something that I was very interested in, and that was performance discharging. So this was one of the very few chargers that had a discharge rate of up to 10 amps. So I could actually discharge batteries and see how they react under load by looking at the voltage and the amperage while it's happening, which in the end resulted in stuff puffing up. But yeah, I'm not using this charger anymore because it was replaced with a couple of different ones down the track. So my next one after this was this Turnigy Quattro thing, I think it's called, which is very similar to, I know the charger that you're using, Travis, the IMAX B6.
Yeah.
It's a very common charger. It's just basically 4 of them in a box. So there's 4 connections on each of them, and by looking at the stuff that's still plugged in here, that kind of indicates for how long I'm not using these anymore, because it still has these parallel 4-way parallel micro JST 1.25 doohickeys plugged into 2 of the outputs. There's 2 more outputs on the other side. Each of them has 2 bullet connectors and then a 6S balance connector. And then each of these channels is individually controlled over those 4 buttons, which is a very common way for chargers. So I had one of these IMAX B6 chargers. Well, I didn't own it, but I've seen them on races in this metal case, and they're very similar to this. The interface looks exactly the same. It's a little cumbersome to operate, and you don't see all the values at the same time on the screen, but it's doing a fairly consistent job as far as I can tell, and you can charge a lot of batteries at the same time. So this was my workhorse for a long time. I've connected 4 parallel charging cables, 1 to each output. That means I could charge 16 little 1S batteries at a time, and that was usually my dose for the flying session. So it takes around 30 to 40 minutes to charge all the batteries up, and then I could go through my 16 batteries, and that was usually my fix for the afternoon. So that's a very reliably good charger, and you can get the single version of that on a lot of different names, and you can, if you're into that, flash the firmware onto them and change the settings and see quite a few different statistics about your batteries. One of the downsides, here's the name of it, it's called the 4x6 charger from Turnigy. I'm pretty sure you can get it for cheap at Hobby King, and then they're going to charge you $100 in shipping. But one thing that it doesn't do really well is it doesn't have a very high discharge capacity, which is not really that necessary for your daily flying fix. However, for me, because I wanted to load test batteries, it was a quite important feature. It also makes sense for personal use by what I call battery hygiene, going through your batteries every couple of months and just looking at the internal resistance and the and the performance when it's discharged at its capacity. So in case you're interested in a more elaborative charger, what I'm currently using, which I think is sort of the creme de la creme of chargers, it's this iCharger, or also I think it also comes branded as Junsi, Junsi. This is the iCharger 406 Duo, which is one of the top models. I think there's a few other ones, and it only has two outputs here, Duo. I wish it had more, but the main benefit of this charger is that it at first has a very high discharge capacity, even higher than this ICE charger, because at first it has a heat dissipation unit in here. So if you start discharging batteries, it starts up a fan and dissipates the heat. But you can also put external loads on it in order to dump the energy of the battery into this, and then discharge batteries at a very high rate. So what I like to do is connect this battery here to one port. This is a 12,400 milliamp 6S, the V8 series. Thank you, Reese. I still haven't given back to you. So if you're watching the stream, ping me and I might give it back to you, because I have different ways of doing this right now. But yeah, you connect a very basically a current sink at one side, in this case the battery, and then you can discharge other batteries at a very high rate. That's the main reason I bought this charger, to kind of check on my batteries. But yeah, it might not be that useful for daily use, and it's quite expensive. It's a couple $100. So yeah, that's sort of the scale of chargers you could use. I think most flyers will be very happy with one multi-purpose charger like the IMAX B6, or what recently has, in the last 1 or 2 years, has become quite popular is chargers from a brand called IDST or ISDT, something like that. They make quite low-priced chargers that come in the different ranges. I think somewhere between $50 and $150, depending on the output capacity, and they're very good value for money if you want to have the ability to charge a lot of different chemistry and cell combinations. But then the charger that I'm using primarily for my 1S flying, I have a whole bunch of these chargers. So this one here was the one that I bought first a couple of years ago, the high-tech X4 micro multi-charger. It has 4 different channels. It charges only 1S LiPo batteries on them, but you can change the current it's putting into them. It's a little dated now because it does not do high voltage batteries. Recently I've discovered that this guy here came out, which is from the same OEM manufacturer but slightly different branded. So this one here has been rebranded from High-Tech, and the original manufacturer I think is called Sky RC, and then they made this one here, which is kind of a little bit of a rip-off of the original High-Tech brand. So it's called, let's say this here, yeah, they have made up this brand here, HTRC, which sounds similar to High-Tech RC, but they literally made this up. But I looked inside and I checked it, and it's pretty much the same stuff in here. The only difference is, as you can see here, it has a switch on each channel, allowing you to change from LiPo to LIHV to high voltage, which changes the cutoff voltage from 4.2 to 4.35 volts. So I'm using primarily these chargers here now to charge up my little 1S batteries, because most of them are 1S, a single cell. So let's see, do we have enough time left to talk a little bit about battery labels and all the information on there? Well, there's only 5 minutes left, so hurry up, Travis. What's on a battery label that is of significance?
Well, before we get into that, because we could leave that for we have more streams to come.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that one of the advantages, if you're getting a 1S specific charger, is that these multi-port battery chargers are so common now, and they're so affordable that it gives you the opportunity to have, an independent charging circuit for each battery that you're charging. And there's lots of discussion as to whether or not parallel charging is good or safe, and it's been addressed many times before. But leaving that completely alone, the advantage to having an independent charging circuit for each battery is, as you're flying, you can go plug a battery in and pluck another one off and keep rotating them in and out, and you don't have to worry about charging 6 batteries at once because they're all on a parallel board. And that's just really convenient to do, because if you've got a couple of these chargers rolling in a dozen packs, you can basically loop indefinitely, and it makes for a really fun evening where there's not a lot of downtime waiting for your batteries. So I'm a huge fan of these multi-port chargers that have these independent charging circuits.
That's right. Yeah, super simple to use, not much to worry about, and yeah, that's why it's also my main workhorse. So before we wrap it up here, let's have a look through the chat room. So I found a couple of questions that I'm gonna talk about. So Travis, if you want to have a look in the meantime in the Discord, if you find something else of interest we're going to talk about. I'm going to focus on the YouTube chat now, and lucky for me, there's not much been happening, so I'll get to the end of this pretty quickly. So we have a whole bunch of people jumping in and saying hello. Hey to everyone in here. There's not many questions being asked, but one of them here at the very bottom, Christopher Potts says, does the X4 HDRC allow you to discharge? No, it doesn't. That's probably the only downside I can really say about this thing if you are focusing on 1S charging. It doesn't let you put those packs back to storage voltage. Apart from that, it's a really awesome charger. I really like it a lot. So much that I actually sourced a couple of them. So if you're interested in this, where's it gone now, in the new version, there's not many shops that are selling this thing but mine. So if you want to have one of them, little plug here, send me a message. There are not many left, but we're gonna order more of them. Really nice charger, works on 12 volts and on right grid power. So yeah, so much about that. Travis, anything else you've picked up on that you want to talk about?
No direct questions in the Discord chat. Big thanks to the guys that are hanging out there and discussing and keeping that chat going. Adam and Foamy Ninja and Mullet, some of our regulars. It's good to see you guys hanging out and hanging with us.
Yep, very good. So someone posted about these ISDT chargers as well. Mullet says he has the Q6 and the Q6 Plus. I know that they're being traded at my local hobby shop here at Phaser FPV. A lot of the boys are using them there, so they must be good. I don't have one, but just because I already have so many of them, that's why I didn't jump on the latest bandwagon of multi-purpose chargers. But if I would buy one right now, that's probably what I would look at. So yeah, my my Mac lady says it's 13 hours here, so right spot on the hour. You know, whenever we do these live streams, I think time's passing on so quickly. I hope we contributed something today to your knowledge and to your entertainment. And yeah, we haven't nearly covered as much as I wanted. There's a lot more things to talk about. We will come back to this topic in around 5 to 6 weeks. Next week, I'm not even sure yet what we're going to talk about. I have put up I think on Friday it was, YouTube sent me a message and say, hey, you know what, here's a new community feature. How about you create a poll for your audience? I thought, great idea. This is exactly what I wanted to do. So I've created a poll on my YouTube channel saying, guys, what do you want to see in the next topic? And right after this chat right after this stream in our offline after the show chat, me and Travis are going to talk about what the topic for the next week is going to be. For those of you who are not familiar yet with the plan, we are having 4 main topics, which are the models themselves, the multi-rotors or the drones, or maybe in the future again, a little bit of planes again. So the carriers for our hobby. Second, the RC transmitters, the remote control. Number 3, the video transmission, all the related technology. And topic number 4, the batteries. So we're going to rotate back to the beginning, but probably not next week just yet. But every time we have finished one of these rotations of these 4 topics, we're going to throw in 1 or 2 more kind of special topics that not necessarily need to be repeated that often. So currently we've thrown into the mix of potential new topics talking about video recording and video editing. And another potential topic is flying together with other people, FPV events, how to avoid interference between your video signals. But if you guys have any other suggestions, what you want to do, what you want to hear about, what you want to talk about, then throw it into the Discord chat right now, right after the show, because that's the time where Travis and I are going to be talking about what we're going to do next week. And then in a couple of days, I will be throwing up the event with the thumbnail for next week and send out notifications about that. So then you're going to know. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us. Lots of messages coming into the YouTube chat right now. Too late, guys. Next time, be quicker, and I'll try to catch up on this, but I can't promise. We're just winging these things here. I have given up on high quality standards in terms of technical performance. I'm willing to admit to all the mistakes we're doing and leaving them up there, and just keep going. And yeah, as I said, I hope it was entertaining and educational for you. And yeah, we see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, Travis, for throwing your whole bucket of sense in here. Always good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Very good. So that's it for today. I will see you, or wrong button again. I will shut off Travis for now, and then I'm saying I will see you on the next one.